Nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. Hello to everybody at home watching Black and White. My name is Liz Moseley and welcome to A Tortoise Thinking. This evening we're joined by Symeon Brown. Thank you very much for being here. Already had a very stressful day filing a piece and has hot-footed it across London thanks to TfL. And has just about made it, enjoying a well-earned beer while we sort of ease ourselves into this evening. This is Symeon's book. It is out now. It's called Get Rich or Lie Trying, and we're going to talk about the influencer economy. And our sort of core thinking question that we're going to try and work out together today is who's to blame. And obviously, if there's someone to blame, then something must be broken. Something must have gone wrong. So I'm going to chat to Symeon in a second about some of the things he's discovered on his travels around the internet and around the real world as well, in fact. He went around to speak to people. And what it is that we think that has gone wrong and why, before we start looking at possible ways, redemption and so on. But before I do that, I just want to get a sense of how influential we all are here. I myself, I don't want you to feel intimidated by this, but I have, in fact, 811 Twitter followers. You're welcome. Put your hand up if you are currently a Twitter user with an account of your own. Nice and high in the air. Okay. Keep your hand up in the air if you have more than 1,000 followers.
Just done that.
Van Eck and Emily, keep your hand up in the air if you have more than 5,000 followers. Emily, you are an influencer. Congratulations. Well done. Very nice. Just genuinely, how long have you been on Twitter as a platform, as an account holder?
As an active user?
Yes.
10 years.
Okay.
10 years.
Okay.
But 7 years properly active.
And when you started out in your Twitterness, what do I call it? Twitter handle. Does the way you use that platform now differ from how it was in the beginning?
I got it because I was standing as a candidate, and it was a kind of prerequisite for politics at the time that you had to do it. But this was before it became such a cesspit.
Okay.
It was considered a really great thing, which obviously has gone slightly
different
wrong
now
when it comes to politics.
It does feel different now. Okay, ready with your hands. Who here is an active Instagram account holder? Okay, slightly different. Interesting. Who here has more than 1,000 followers on Instagram? John the Vegan and Imi. Keep your hand up if you have more than 5,000 followers on Instagram. Okay, Imi, you're the Instagram influencer. Tell us about your Instagram. Is it your personal one? Is it a business one? What's your thing on Instagram?
It's personal, it's private. I often reject people that I don't know because I don't want strangers.
So you've got
following
1,000 actual friends?
Just like friends.
Okay.
Like friends of friends. And then I follow lots of influencers.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Now, if you're comfortable to do this, I'm going to chance my arm a little bit. Has anybody ever made money out of their social media presence in any way, shape or form in the room?
What about online?
In the chat? Andrew Good. Actually, I know about Andrew because we had a chat last week. Andrew does, I think, monetize a little bit of his internet presence. Let's go to Andrew to understand. He is a legitimate influencer. Are you there, Andrew?
I'm not an influencer, but hi.
Go on, Andrew. Tell us just a bit about, because we had a chat about this last week, so I don't want to.
Yeah. So I wear two hats. I'm going to take my marketing, working with influencers hat off. I'm going to put I'm a blogger, not an influencer hat on. So as a hobby, I blog, and each blog has a social media profile on Twitter, Instagram, something like that. I tend to monetize through affiliate links, which I disclose. Sometimes in flashing neon lights that beat you over the head when you arrive, as the authorities would like, sometimes more discreetly. There's no right way to do it because your affiliate relationship can come and go. What I actively refuse is blurring the line between editorial and advertorial. Okay. And that, I think, is where the economy is broken and where everything's going wrong. And I say I'm not an influencer because I don't influence anybody. The few times that I would have influenced anybody and where I would actually use an influencer as a marketer is when I'm alerting somebody to a thing that they don't know. So like a new ethical food delivery app launched in Edinburgh, taking on Deliveroo. you didn't know about it. They worked with influencers to tell people about it. I did it for free because I wanted to broadcast the news. That I conceived is not so much influence, more like awareness. Okay. But the money for me is peanuts because of that ethical line I take.
Thank you, Andrew. That's a good place to start talking to you, Symeon, I think, because Andrew has drawn an implicit line between the ability to make tons of cash and to stay decent in the process. Is that a fair equivalence, do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's important to, I always have to clarify this. I'm not anti-influencer. I don't hate influencers. I guess what I was interested in primarily was that when you think about an influencer, people usually imagine somebody who's been on Love Island, somebody posing, taking selfies with hundreds of thousands of followers, preferably, usually probably a young woman. But actually, the book is about digital work and about how the social media has stepped in to fill a void for a generation for which the economic contract is broken. And largely, it's an extension, I guess, of people seeing this space as a world of possibilities, but actually how rife of exploitation it is, and also how the incentives of it do distort our behavior. And actually, I think that the incentives, if you look at the platforms and how they changed us, Twitter was an example earlier on about how Twitter has become a cesspit, largely due to the incentives that it rewards, how it rewards users and the way that grows. And so it's about then how the incentives then change our behavior and lead to deception, lead to an escalation of dishonesty. And so those are the things that I'm primarily interested in, as opposed to the fact that everybody online is a scammer. Although increasingly, sometimes the platforms do encourage us to behave this way.
Yeah, interesting. There's tons in the book. Some of it I might ask you to explain because I can't quite follow the business model of some of the things that some of the people are doing. But there's the opening chapter, and you mentioned the sort of archetype of what we would imagine an influencer to be. It would be a Molly May type of figure, typically a young woman with a certain kind of aesthetic, selling clothes and or other beauty products, stuff like that. And your starting point for the sort of how this story, and it really does sort of fan out into all kinds of different ways of making money, is Fashion Nova. Who knows what Fashion Nova is? I had never heard of it, but Lola's heard of it. Okay. Hashtag Nova Babe. This is the thing.
That's past me, but I appreciate that particular hashtag was past me, but I've heard of Nova. I'm not entirely sure how or why. Must be via an Instagram platform of some kind. Okay. I mean, I am amazed they've not approached me. Maybe it's coming. But just tell us a bit about what Fashion Nova is and why it's so, as the starting point of this story, why is that the thing?
I mean, I guess it's like everybody's Twitter feed looks different based on who you follow, and therefore that kind of sets up probably your input into the world, right? And so the people who are influencers in your world probably different to the influencers who are influencers in my world, and vice versa. I guess a lot of what I was writing about was a world and the cultures with which hip-hop culture, it has the hegemony, right? And hip-hop is now pop music, you know, you're more likely to find drill music at #1 in the charts anywhere else. And I was looking at, I guess, the cultural lens of influencer culture from that avenue, of which Fashion Nova is a huge, I guess, Goliath kind of clothing manufacturer in America. Certainly in hip-hop, it's like saturated that scene. So, you know, Cardi B, a huge rapper, has a line with Fashion Nova. Untold rappers, Tiger, the Kardashian family, super aligned to Fashion Nova, even when they're in dispute with Fashion Nova. And so I was looking at this particular brand and how there is a dual model of exploitation taking place, both in the production of the clothes, but also in how it's been able to generate itself as a huge factory of hype on the internet, using or rather exploiting people's desire to grow their followings. People have to buy the clothes first, and in some cases, they feel they have to modify their bodies to suit the aesthetic for what a Nova Babe is. And so a lot of the young women that I interviewed who were coming from kind of, I guess, multiracial kind of communities, coming from like the ends or the hood or whatever, they were like, you know what, the way that I can change my circumstances is by getting a brand deal with Fashion Nova, maybe PLT, And to do that, I need to get a BBL, Brazilian butt lift, and look a certain way and have that particular shape, which is been kind of propelled by the hip hop aesthetic and the proliferation of, I guess, that scene. And so Fashion Nova was became a huge thing a few years ago, and it still has that kind of currency in that world. And so it was a way of, I guess, looking at the various different intersections of influencer culture, the production, the hype, the cultural elements, the economics, to kind of really kind of look at the nature of some of these economies, you could say. And it's interesting that a lot of people didn't know about Fashion Nova, because if I was somewhere else, for example, people would be wearing Fashion Nova.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, the book is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because of the lens and the place that I'm writing from, as somebody whose Twitter is like, you know, I could be in Labour Twitter, which is a hellhole. I could be Black Twitter, another kind of hellhole. I could be in all kinds of intersections, right? And I'm writing from a place where I'm kind of in all of them, but as an outsider. And then that comes into the book. And for some people, it's like, yo, what's this? I've never seen this before. And for other people, it's like, right, yeah, I've never seen anybody approach a critique of BLM from this angle, or from Black Twitter from this angle, or whatever. And I think that is been one of the things that I've been curious to see how people receive it. Because Fashion Nova is a unicorn, is a major juggernaut, but yet it's under the radar of a certain type of person, which is interesting in itself.
It's really interesting in itself. And there's lots of things in it. I was very conscious as I read it. There's lots of things in it that are totally alien to me as a sort of middle-aged, white, slightly overweight lesbian. This is just not in my world at all. But everything, that there are synergies between all of the stories that you tell, and I found myself thinking about it's not clear in this world, and in the way you tell the story. I don't know if that was deliberate or not. It's not clear in this world what is the morality frame, what is the victim criminal frame, and you're, I think, careful to step away from that most of the time. There's one PR person you bump into who was pretty and obnoxious, and but there's very little sort of specific criticism of people. You're saying, this is what this person is doing, this is the way that they speak, this I'm reporting, but you usually stop shy of judging them.
I think for me, I was trying to tell an economic story, and I was trying to report, and I wasn't trying to make over judgments. I was really trying to say, look, these are some of the incentives at the moment. This is how it's playing out in these different kind of influencer worlds. Some of these you would assume to be influencers. These young women getting these kind of procedures to get fast fashion deals, you assume they're influencers. The NFT crypto guys, purely influencer model that somehow managed to escape that branding. And I kind of drawn all these things, but because I was trying to look at just how this fit into our current economic consensus and how it wasn't working, I was trying to leave that judgment there and making sure that there was a balance of those people having agency, but also the critique being most, I guess, pointed at the current economic consensus. And why it is that some of the pyramid schemes that people ended up in, why they were there. Because they really couldn't participate in the real Ponzi scheme, which is you go to Silicon Valley, you look a certain way, you sound a certain way, and then someone says, you sound great. I'm going to give you $10 million for some cab app, literally like something that's been done before. Or WeWork, an estate agent, but looks like a startup, but isn't really. So it's like you can't participate in this Game of Thrones, so you have to participate in this one down here. And so that for me was what I was trying to do. And some people have appreciated that, and some people are like, yo, why are you being so lenient? But then other people find it quite aggressive. Some people felt, oh, I was dragging people on Black Twitter and maybe naming people who aren't usually named in some spaces. But I generally felt it was quite neutral. So I'm glad that you felt it too.
Yeah, I really did. There's two specific things that I didn't understand, so forgive me if you, just while I properly get my head around. Because the book talks about, as you just said, it talks about a bit about how people are making money on the platform, and then the more interesting thing really is why, and then I suppose we'll talk in a second about what to do about that. But drop shipping, I felt like I understood it in the first time we came across it, but then it became this much bigger thing that your man Joel was doing, and then I just lost track of the business model. So talk me through. I'm going to launch a dropshipping empire, I think. So talk me through how I'm going to do that.
I mean, okay. Let's say that you would like to sell, I don't know, glass bottles.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make them.
No.
You don't want to go anywhere near the production.
Definitely not.
So you basically just set up a website. You find a producer, maybe in China, on Alibaba or whatever, and basically you connect them simply to a website who people can access and then buy straight from your website. Okay. So you're not involved in any of the business operation side. Okay. They might not even get the product. You don't know. That's not your business. You're really just basically at the front end, driving the transactions and the sales and things of that nature. The issue is that in those kind of models, they break down constantly. The people that were in it, I would say, would describe it as scammy because they're so used to the fact that there are complaints or there are cancellations, or there's actually just rife with fraudsters anyway. But they're basically creating brands with shop faces, but not doing any part of the business operation. So they're basically just companies, they're just drop shipping. So they're basically just a face. Okay. But then what that does is it creates, I guess, a lot of conflicts of interest. When if you email your company, no one's picking up the email. You're not responding to the emails because you're just like, not my problem. I'm just drop shipping. And I guess that there's more to it, and some people will say that they're trying to be good drop shippers, but largely that's a lot of what it is.
There's no law against that. There's no law against doing that thing, that drop shipping thing. You can do it. It's legal.
You can drop ship, yeah. Drop shipping is lots of people make lots of money from drop shipping, because the way that you make the money historically has been you put a lot of money maybe into adverts on Facebook, or maybe if you manufacture shares on Facebook. You put loads of money in, so that basically you pretty much know your kind of cost per click. Cost per click. If you're putting like hundreds of thousands in, then you know how much you're going to make back. But it's largely, if it's just you and another person, the sheer number of transactions, it's like you're not really following, or you're not keeping an order sheet like that. You're not keeping on top of it like that. It's mainly just about driving the clicks and the sales, and hoping that your suppliers who you've connected to, wherever they are in China or whatever, is just sending it. In some cases, people eventually get it maybe in 3 months or 4 months rather than the 1 week that they're claiming. In some cases, they never get it. And certainly in the stories of my book, people weren't getting their products.
It was almost like the guy that was doing this he was sort of flipping them, wasn't he? He would set one up, and then it was all about the timing of when he switched it off, that he would be able to then come with another one and another one and another one. Interesting. Has anyone been scammed by drop shipping that they know of? Ordered something and then not got it? No, I don't know if I have. Okay, thank you for explaining it. And then the next thing that I couldn't quite get my head around, and then we're going to come on to a bit more of this morality, and I want to hear from some people. There's some really interesting stuff happening in the chat. Is we've had a number of conversations here recently about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. It's not a big part of this, but that sense of a pyramid scheme is very present. And you talk about some actual pyramid schemes that we would recognise as multi-level marketing that in the book, but that sort of live online, and the promise of those. I suppose what I'm interested in is there's a part of it where you say, on my notes, that the promise of great wealth is so compelling, and the environment of the internet makes it feel really possible to do. But the actual people who are hitting the big time are sort of vanishingly few and far between. So there's a real disconnect between this sense of there's money just there for the taking. Who am I harming? And I suppose I'm interested to know how you sort of unpack that reality of the difference between, if you just work hard and do the right stuff, the riches are there, but they're not really. Even if you forget about not being able to access the, inverted commas, real stuff in Silicon Valley, even then people aren't making loads of money, but everyone's trying. How do you, having done all this work and met all these people, some of them sad, some of them not sad, some of them regretful, some of them not regretful, where did you end up in terms of your sort of economic read of how the internet works?
The internet's a huge place, right? But it's like, to go back to your initial point about NFTs and crypto, a lot of the kind of people who are in the book who were engaging in drop shipping and then engaging in what was like forex trading, binary options, which are almost the precursor then to, people getting involved in crypto and now NFTs. Like it's the same hustle, but it kind of, I guess, regenerates itself to some extent. And so I guess there are innovators in, I guess, the crypto field and stuff of that nature, but there's also a lot of imitators, and that's where a lot of the fraud and the hype and I guess the Ponzi's pyramid scheme nature of it comes into play. I think that for me, what I was really kind of critiquing was, I guess, the promise that anybody can be rich, anybody can make it. And a lot of certainly working class people who I guess I interviewed and who I was interested in from the kind of areas that I was from, and I grew up in Tottenham, really believed that they were on their own. There was no possibilities politically for any kind of support. There was no imagination and that was possible. That this is the only system imaginable. So you have to hustle, get your money up, get rich. It's the values of hip hop to do what you can. The internet promises you can do that once upon a time with education, go to university, you can do these things, but that promise has even shifted a lot, the past 10 years. And so it was about how social media was filling that gap and the possibilities of that. But of course, you have the same kind of hierarchies in terms of the people who become extremely wealthy are outliers, and you have a lot of young people who believe that if they're not super wealthy, if they're not super successful, then they're that's a moral failing. And I think even amongst people who have come from middle-class homes, there is a sense of imposter syndrome or failure if they haven't hit certain milestones, let alone if you haven't. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I guess that was what I was primarily interested in. And I think that certainly on the economies that I was looking at, which are rife with kind of exploitation and pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes, which was the closest imaginable world in which they could inhabit to try and achieve their dreams. Some people did manage to do that. Some people did manage to hustle their way up, but then they were always kind of outliers, and there was always many more people who didn't. And then what were the things that they were doing and turning to? And so that, I think, was the real question then. How then do you effectively prevent that? And really, it comes back to looking at the real failure in our current economic consensus and the failure to deliver, and housing and the ridiculous housing crisis that we're in, and work in real terms not paying for people who graduated. Post-financial crisis, wages are down by like 30%. Compared to people who graduated in the 70s. And then you have all these kind of tightening things that are happening. Really, it's that where the critique, I think, is sharpest. And so it's like, it looks like a book that's critiquing influencer culture, and I guess it is, but influencer culture as the next stage of precarity, the gig economy, inequality, and the fact that there is a lack of political imagination and collectivism because no one feels that that's possible.
It's definitely a book about inequality. I definitely got that. Katie.
So I'm Katie. Hi, thanks for this. I guess in most things you can never be in the top percentage of kind of earners and the ones that break through. But I'm fascinated in all of your sort of research and conversations. Did you kind of get a formula that was actually I could earn 30 grand a year and earn more than the living wage? And what would it take to earn 30 grand a year in kind of using this ecosystem and the economy that you've been investigating? Because to me, that kind of almost sets the bar, doesn't it, to people? Because you're like, can you earn more than the living wage?
I mean, the interesting thing, right, is that, like, digital work, right, is where a lot of people are. And most people are not making the crazy amounts of money. But what they have to do to even make... So there's a guy that I was with, right? I think one of my favorite characters is named EBZ. And he was down and out. He was homeless. He was living in Skid Row. I don't know if anyone knows about Skid Row, but it's a wild place in California, in LA. Years later, he then was doing Uber. Then one day, EBZ like a black man. One day, a famous alt-right kind of live streamer gets in his car. He's live streaming. He becomes a character in this guy's kind of world and community. Now he's a live streamer. Effectively, you can pay him to racially abuse him, pay $5, $10. And one day I was with him, and he was making, I don't know, in the hour, he made about $12 or something of that nature. So he was making now an income as a live streamer, being abused, people swatting him. Do you know what swatting is? People swatting him for entertainment, and that was how he earned his living. Now that's his work, and I'm like, yo, are you cool with this? And he's like, you know, someone calling me the N-word, that's child's play. But, you know, me not paying my rent, that's serious. And so it was like, he's monetizing via tips, via his life becoming entertainment. And there's very different ways that people can monetize their lives. There, you know, there's dropship. There's a plethora of ways that you can make money online, and it may not necessarily be, you know, Mr. Beast or a millionaire or Molly May or whatever, but you know, you can make an income. But then also that then feeds into other kind of questions, other ethics about work, the nature of work. What is really the quality of his workplace? I mean, that's a question to discuss. I don't make too many overt judgments, but I mean, it is quite grim, in my opinion. But it's like, then it speaks to kind of the precarity and the position that he occupies in the labour market, that he felt that this is what that he could do. So it's like, the internet is so broad that it's like there's loads of ways to make money. And but I think the question then comes down to what is the nature of this work? Why? And then how does it change us? So another thing that I was interested in was, I guess, kind of clout rage on Twitter. And I've got a chapter called Black Lives Matter, Here's My Cash App. And it looks at influencers driven by, I guess, economic motives who, I guess, had hijacked social movements and then, I guess, distorted justice campaigns because they needed someone to be an enemy on any given day because they needed to drive engagement so they could then put their Cash App or whatever, do you know what I'm saying? So it's then like, when you're plugged into that as a form of work, then how does that then misrepresent public life? So there's all these kind of implications and things of this nature, which is what I was interested in, you could say.
There's so much stuff happening in the chat that I want to come to shortly. We're halfway through. We're just gonna have a 2-minute, what do we call it? A slow down, a relax. You all talk to the person next to you, think up questions that we want to cover in the second half. People at home, go to the loo, have a drink, come back, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. And I want to talk to Tony, I want to talk to Anushka, and Tomini as well, who are having some, and Luke in the chat when we come back. But just take 2 minutes and we'll just regroup. Hello, Katie's gesturing to Michelle. Are you a secret influencer, Michelle?
I'm not. However, my cousin is.
Oh.
My cousin is a young mum of 4.
You're right.
And she just started an Instagram account, tips and tricks to manage a family of 4, you know, get the lunch boxes prepared the night before, just simple things. And then all of a sudden as the following started to build, she started to get approached by brands. So she's regularly in the Sun now, you know, and I don't think she earns monetary as in an income, but she certainly in value gets lots and lots of things, product.
Yeah. Funnily enough, my best friend from when I was little, when I was like a baby basically, has built a brilliant business. It's called The Second Row. Check it out on Instagram. Where influencers like your, is it your cousin you said, who get sent clothes to wear them on mummy blogs and stuff like that. They obviously don't pay for those clothes, but she is a second-hand market for those clothes. So they've been worn once by an influencer and snapped by Rachel Stevens, you know, that used to be in S7, yeah? I'm looking at Mark, my pop music correspondent. It's a really famous one, and so there's a market now, and she's built a whole business out that employs people. So it's not always bad. In fact, is Tony Yates there? Tony, I think, might have the most followers of anybody who's here this evening, because you've got nearly, hi Tony, you've got nearly 20,000 followers, haven't you?
That's right, yeah.
Tell us how you got them.
How did I get them? I don't know. I tweet about economics and initially, and then I got sucked into tweeting about politics. And since I work mostly on my own now, I think also it became a substitute for having colleagues. So inevitably you get drawn into, you know, just bantering with people too.
Did you mention in the chat, was it you that says you're a climber?
Yes.
And so, and you said that the influencer, I suppose there's a climbing internet, I guess, with characters and stuff like that, that you feel that there has been some really good stuff that's happened as a consequence of what we might call influencer economy in that world. Tell us about some of the positives.
I think the positives are that it makes a community that was very fractured before. So, you get to hear about what everybody's doing. And also because everyone is uploading their climbs, whenever you go to a new destination, if you want it, there's probably a video of somebody trying what you want to try. So you can actually tell whether you could do it and, whether you might die in it or not. Whereas before, all of that existed only on rumor and hearsay. And, so that's really positive. But there are lots of negatives as well, which echo the themes about the, more mainstream effects of social media.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. That's an interesting point, because there's the Tony's talking about community, and in the early days of the internet, we all thought, oh, this is going to be nice. We're going to come together. We're going to be connected. Facebook talked about connecting all the time, but the book, it's a very much an individual. I mean, that's the principle of the economics, I suppose. But some of the sort of malign magic of the sort of mangled commercialized feminism schemes, the girl boss world, it does very much lean into, you're going to be part of a community, we're going to support you, you're going to have friends, but the friends aren't real because it's all transactional.
I find that community is one of these terms, right, where it's like Zuckerberg says our community. And what they mean is our consumers, our users. Yeah. A community is one of these terms that has been appropriated, right? You assume support and all these manner of things, but I don't know, for a lot of people, I don't know how real that actually is, certainly when companies use it, to be honest with you. Yeah. I mean, look, if you're, I think sometimes there's a kind of a binary, is social media good? Is it bad? Yeah. And it's like, I mean, that's not my, I don't know, I'm not interested in that question, to be honest. Yeah. It's more about, okay, let's look at what this trend is a part of. Yeah. Let's look at the other side of this supposed meritocracy that rewards, just talent and hard work. Let's look at actually some of the other things that are very much present in this ecosystem. So, I don't know. I mean, it's like if people feel rewarded by their lives on social media and who they've connected with, these are good trends. But there are also lots of other ways in which, as this space becomes the primary site of human culture, and increasingly more significantly than that, the primary site of work and labour, and both of them now merge together, in which there is now almost no separation between the two. What is the impact of that? And are we going to get to that point where suddenly it's too late? I mean, we were talking about, I guess, with kind of Cambridge Analytica, the impact on politics. That's been a big conversation that we'd already had. But some of the questions around, labour and work and our way of life, these things maybe kind of don't happen so much, let alone all the interesting kind of cultural phenomenons which are kind of beneath the radar, like the proliferation of the BBL shape and how that is related to economics and internet trends and things of that nature. So it's like there's a lot happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'd love to hear from Anushka. I'd love to hear from Luke. And then we're going to try and get into this blame question. Hi, Anushka.
Hi, good evening.
Nice to see you.
It's so good to see you. And what a topic. There is so much to say. Like, I consider myself a science communicator on Twitter because I talk about tech, science, predominantly space. And that is why I ended up working in the space sector, because I got chosen to attend the launch of a satellite from Vandenberg Space Force Base by NASA, I would say 6-7 years ago, and that became the beginning of my career in the space sector. But I think at that time, I think there's a point in the chat now about community versus kind of communication. I was very much communicating my passion for space, and to NASA, that was great because I was a Brit. I could introduce some of the work they were doing to a wider sort of global audience, but it was very much community focused. So there is a kind of like a bit in the middle where they intersect. And just so many thoughts, we've been firing off on so many different directions. If you want to hone in on something, let me know. But I'm also happy to pass the mic because I think Luke's been saying some epic things.
Thanks, Anushka. It's lovely to see you. And I think it's cool to be a space influencer. I feel like if I was going to be an influencer, I would influence space, would be my field of influence. Luke, you would have been, first of all, a much better editor of this thinking than I am because you understand this better. And you've done loads of work, well, we've talked a lot, haven't we, about crypto and Bitcoin. What should we be going after in this? You know, Symeon's laid out an enormous field for us to look at. Where is the gold dust for us journalistically in this?
Yeah, it's a good question. That I think what Symeon just said about it becoming the primary site for a lot of human activity is an interesting thing to look at, because we've seen in the past few years the move towards your social media reach being influential in whether you get hired or not. Your social media reach being influential in whether you're considered for particular promotions. And so the world of work's one thing, but there's a whole other dimension, which is about how we form relationships, romantic relationships, and the amount of control that platforms have. And I've been talking a bit about algorithms. The amount of control that platforms now have over our lives through some of the mechanisms that Symeon talks about it's completely extraordinary. It's like, I don't know. And I often kind of find myself asking this question when we're looking at these companies for tech states or other thinkings and stuff. It's like, it feels mad that we aren't up in arms about this. A handful of companies, literally you can count them on one hand, have this just outrageous outsized effect on the way that lots of parts of our lives function. And they don't even tell us how they have that effect, because the systems that maintain it are not transparent. In some cases, the companies will even say, like, we can't actually explain it because we've used techniques that are so sort of detailed and complex and things that we don't properly understand how to put it on a piece of paper that we could give you. So I think that we need to follow very closely how the battle for transparency unfolds around a company like Meta, because at the moment we rely on leaks, but actually I think they've got a growing footprint of what they call like transparency reporting, and that's an important thing. We obviously need to pay attention to the what happens in the secondary legislation after the online harms bill, because the online harms bill is supposedly, through its codes of practice, going to make these companies, these big category 1 companies, have to tell us more about what content they promote, which people they give a platform to, what gets seen the most. And then one final thing on cryptocurrency and how influencing plays into that. I think Tortoise can and should take a much more kind of robust stance on the issues that are inherent in promoting cryptocurrency and NFTs of that kind of. We've been doing what I think has been a good, fair, balanced investigation of it for some time, but there are very serious people like Nobel Prize winners, storied economists and scientists who are saying, like, this is a terrible, terrible thing. Yeah. And it's being driven by, as far as we can tell, sort of this immoral influencer economy where everybody just wants you to ride the bus behind them. So those are a few things. I mean, as Anushka said, like there's just a huge amount wrapped up in this conversation. And I actually think that's quite telling, because it shows us just how many areas of society and areas of our lives this influencer question touches. So yeah, it's a lot.
Thank you, Luke. Luke is the reporter that leads our tech states reporting. Symeon, I was going to ask you, as you've described, and it feels this way, the book is a critique of an economic system. And whilst the sort of way of operating that Luke's talking about of the big tech companies is in there as a way of explaining how the schemes work and explaining how they can perpetuate and influence and so on, you don't go for the big tech companies specifically as the sort of villains of the piece.
I think I do, but I mean, I guess the book is. I mean, one of the reviews, I think, they said it was quietly polemic. They said it was quietly polemic.
I'll get you a T-shirt with that one.
They said it was quietly polemic. And the book is not overtly a polemic. I didn't want it to be or feel like a polemic. But there is an argument there that kind of bubbles away subtly. And I think in the final chapter where it all influences, it does end with, like, you know, social media has re-galvanized the pyramid scheme in various ways. And the reason why pyramid schemes are back in fashion, even down to the way that NFTs and crypto is booming and the way that they're working, is like because it largely fits into the logic of the way that social media works. And so it just seems like, oh, well, how can that be wrong when this is just how this space works? So it was like, fundamentally, though, the real winners are the companies. And that's what the book is overtly saying. Yeah. And it does look at the fact that despite people going online, it's like everybody's being forced into digital work of some capacity. The people that benefit from the tweets or the live streams ultimately are the shareholders of these companies who are allowed to play the game because they've been given a ticket. Yeah. So in the final chapter, you know, I go and visit a friend of mine who's a Y Combinator, hoping to, you know, achieve that dream. And then, you know, just recounting the real players who obviously benefit from the real tech boom. So no, I think that critique is there. Maybe it could have been louder, but I like the volume of it. You could say I like the volume of it. But no, I think that the huge inequality, both economically and politically, that exists between us and these platforms is a real scandal that we kind of passively just roll with. Is that right?
I think I suppose what I'm getting at is you're a journalist, we're journalists here, and we've focused our reporting on those big tech companies to understand them, to try and, you know, make transparent what they don't want to be transparent has been a sort of key theme. We've also done a whole bunch of stuff. Alexi Moshus and others here, I've done a whole bunch of stuff on porn and the porn industry, the internet porn industry, and that is a way of talking about internet exploitation that's just really gettable because people have a position on porn already. What you do here is talk about exploitation and technology together in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect, because people don't have a position already, a moral position on shopping for clothes, for example. And I suppose I'm interested in, for us, it's something for us to think about, how we can draw down what we learned from the porn work that we did and all of the stuff that Alexi and Luke have been doing on tech. The thing about talking about the big tech companies is that it's quite cold and distant. They seem so shadowy, you know, but here it's people.
I see your point.
It's the girl with the butt lift who's sad about it, you know, and it's a more accessible way of saying, oh, this is how it damages us.
I think it's interesting because I say it a lot. It's interesting, isn't it? But there's like a lot of, like you say, a lot of books around technology and a lot of the books that I've read, you know, they're trying to be like definitive takes on the internet. Here's this history of Meta. Here's this history of Instagram. This is the history of this and all this kind of stuff. But my book, it was definitely trying to focus on people, individual stories, and really just the human condition. And if that's at the heart of it, and you know, people have said, oh, you know, you've negated statistics, and it's like, stats are there they're out there if you want them, but you know, the power of a person always wins for me, and that's where the value is, and that's where the connection is, and that is where I think that's what we yearn to connect with, to be honest. And so for me, that was always going to be the way into discussing technology and culture and economics. And although economics likes to present itself as this kind of mathematics, it really isn't. And my background was in economics at university, and it's like, no, like you are a social science, stop begging it. So it's like, I think that people have to be at the heart of the story. That always has to be the way in. And then you can look at the inequality that persists with somebody making a living now being racially abused on the platforms where the shareholders are, you know, are richer than God. And I think that is where you get to look at, okay, the precarity and all the other aspects of it, the psychological impacts of it. And I think, people have to be central in my view, and that's how you get into it. And even in just technical aspects, obviously I do television. It's like reporting on tech for TV is absolutely awful. It's just like, we're outside Meta. Here's a sign of the building. Another building. Now I'm at a computer. And it's like, you know, it's like people are always the way in.
It's a good point. Mark, were you waving at me? Annabelle, would you pass Mark a thing? Thanks.
You're going to groan at this.
Oh, no. I'm already groaning.
So this is just a thing about like the community idea and the relationship sort of between influencers, consumers and the press. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Right, so Eurovision this year.
Oh no, here he goes.
No, but it's interesting. So basically this year, the organisers have completely clamped down on access to press passes for like the fans and the influencers who have like an Instagram account. They've said like no more because they're fed up with having thousands of screaming Eurovision Song Contest fans running around the press area for a week when there are journalists there from like entertainment papers trying to cover it. And it's kind of completely kicked off in the fan community. But I thought that was quite interesting that they've decided that coverage from those fan sites
is less legit than if it runs on CNN or something.
Thank you. I'm being laughed at from my boss on the other side of the room. But yeah, I thought that was curious.
It feels like quite a retrograde step in many ways. Yeah, interesting. We're in the last sort of 5 minutes or so. Symeon, we asked our question, who's to blame? Who is to blame? I think it's not me. Feel confident to say. But where you've put this together in an attempt to explain the realities and situate it in a sort of moral and economic framework, I think.
And also a history of labour, of work and labour history.
What next as a journalist? Like, where does the story go? We instinctively want to know, well, if it's broken, how do we fix it? That's kind of our job, I guess, to talk about mending things. Where do we start?
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I said that again, didn't I? But it's like I wrote this book. My first draft was just before lockdown and the COVID, and then when COVID happened, you had people furloughed. My editor was furloughed as well. You had a lot of people turning to the internet to make money, and that's why we saw a huge, massive, also kind of a huge investment in kind of like major companies. They just skyrocketed. All these kind of things happened, but a lot of people were turning how to make money on YouTube, how to be an influencer, how to edit, how to do all these things. So digital work was swelling. Now what do we have? Cost of living crisis, energy going up. That turn to the internet is going to be even more rife as a way to kind of generate an income. That's been one of the biggest drivers of NFTs and cryptos and some of these scams and all these kind of things. So for me, it's like this is like the story of our time as things get tighter, as people feel like work isn't paying, as they also feel more exposed to, being literate and being ambitious and expecting just to have the basis of middle class life, house. Even if you can't own it, then at least like stability in that rent. Just the basic things that you see other people having. Then it's like, well, the way to do that is via some kind of content-based life online. And so it's very much situated within these kind of questions of just how can we achieve these things, and then if there is no kind of answer from government on the cost of living and energy bills and these kind of things. They have no kind of questions or solutions from government on housing, let alone people being educated and then feeling like they're now saddled with debt and they can't achieve what it is that they want for their lives. Then it's like that space becomes more appealing. It thrives more. There's more exploitation. There's more scams, and there's also, I guess, the growth of those values that are at the heart of this kind of hustle culture, the proliferation of that. So, for me, like that's really the trend that we're seeing. And certainly, when I was writing about, initially the book started off as a long read called The Walls of Instagram that I wrote, I think 2018 maybe. I wrote it in The Guardian. And I guess I started pulling threads, and then I saw how there was some similar behavior in different kind of influencer ecosystems. But it was like, like I said, all those people now have jumped off Forex, jumped into crypto, jumped into NFT, jumped into always the next hustle, always the next thing. And so it's like, it's the same trend, but a different, I guess, stage, a different stage of that trend. So, I mean, that's just the story of the moment right now. And I think that those challenges, I'm sure everyone's seen the viral clip of was it the money saving expert?
Yeah.
Of him saying, listen, he's like, shit's about to get real.
Yeah.
Can I say shit or can't say shit?
You can definitely say shit.
Okay.
You can say fuck if you want.
So he's saying shit's about to get real.
Yeah.
And so it's like there are real kind of questions that are not being solved, and there's also a lack of imagination, a lot of political imagination.
Yes.
Which instead of leading to, I guess, collective-based action, is just leading to more hustle. And that, I guess, is also the problem. And even though I'm talking like this and I sound all jargony and academic, the book isn't really like that. It's a super easy read.
It is,
And it's written for most of the people who are kind of in the book. So it's just like super accessible. So actually, if you're at Anorak, you'd be like, what is this? But it's like, I think that for me is still the question that is unanswered, that I would like to be answered.
That lack of proper political imagination, I feel like, and you're right, it is super accessible, even though I still didn't understand drop shipping. It is. The lack of political imagination, I think, relates to that kind of what I was getting at a bit when I was talking about, if you talk about the big tech companies, they feel far away, is that we talk about the influencer economy and the internet like it's something else from real life still. We still sort of speak about it like it's something that lives inside your phone or inside your computer, and it doesn't. It lives everywhere, all the time, mediates everything. And I feel like the same political brain that has had all the ideas for the last 30 years is still trying to come at it from the same place. And I think what this book is really helpful way of explaining is that those rules don't apply. I can see that the little flag has gone up. Agatha has made her way across the screen, and I'm probably meant to wrap up, but I'd really love to hear just very briefly from Tomini and Swathi, actually. I don't know if you're sitting next to one another in the same room. Be cute if you are. I've been doing the chat. Hey, Tomini.
Hey. I'm afraid we're not together.
That's okay. So Tomini is a social media, does social media here for Tortoise. You're also an actress. And I'd love to know, the chat's been on fire. I've read probably 20% of it, but also what you personally in your world make of all what we've talked about tonight, and what should we be going after as Tortoise?
I think it's easy for a lot of people to kind of not necessarily look the other way, but I think social media, as I think Lucas mentioned, is built by design to be addictive. It's like a game or slot machines or something like that. And I think the exclusivity is built into it. But I think it's easy to turn a blind eye when people don't want to admit that they're influenced. If it's kind of hard if you're on social media not to be influenced one way or the other. It really is, without just not being on it. But I think we're taught that it's the most current thing. You have to be on social media. And I don't think everyone that uses it is negatively influenced, but I think it would be good to get people to be honest. And I don't think I'm not shaming people for not saying, oh yeah, actually it's made me feel a bit shit, or it's made me feel like this or that. But I think until we get a true sense of the impact of social media, and I think that's where we could go, we're all just kind of pretending that it's fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh my God. That was terrifying. Tomini, thank you. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've really enjoyed the book. Symeon, thank you for your time and good luck with it. It's out now. If you are a Tortoise member, let us know if you'd like to have a copy. There's a ton of stuff that I may be with Luke and Tomini tomorrow when you come, and if you're in, let's go through the chat and let's work out how we feed this back into what you're doing on Tech States and what you're doing with the Lexi. I think there are story ideas. I've spied some whiz past me as we've been sitting here talking today. Take away with you, if anything, this idea that social media is inside of and outside of all of us, and whenever we sit down and look at our screens on our Instagram or our Twitter, we're not using a tool, it is using us in some way, shape or form. And let that be a lesson to you all. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining us. Take care.